We arrived at the Netherlands American Cemetery on a beautiful spring day, and we were immediately met by the most amazing group of people. As I described it in my book, this American cemetery outside the small Dutch town of Margraten has an incredible graves adoption program, where each and every grave, and even every name on the walls of the missing, has a local Dutch citizen who has adopted the gravesite. They place flowers on the graves on key dates, like the service member's birth date or death date, and they try to make contact with families back in the United States to let them know that their relatives' graves are being well looked after. As one adoptee described it to me, these fallen American soldiers have become a part of their family. The adoption program started right at the end of the war, and in many cases the adopted grave has been passed down from one generation to the next. Today, there is even a waiting list to adopt graves. My family and I were met by many of the adoptees of the brothers' gravesites, along with members of the foundation board that runs the adoption program. I was able to give a brief overview of the Brothers in Arms project and my book, and then we headed out to the cemetery to visit some of the brothers' gravesites. The towering memorial building can be seen for miles along a road that dates back to Roman times, and the grounds now commemorate over 8,300 fallen American service members, along with 1,700 listed on the walls of the missing. We started at the gravesite of the Delmonico brothers from Cincinnati, Ohio, and were joined by this kind Dutchman who has adopted their graves. As you may remember from the book, the brothers were sons of Italian immigrants. One brother, Frank, had been killed in March 1945 toward the end of the war, while the other brother, Don, had survived the war and even earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award in the U.S. Army. Sadly, however, Don was killed in a car accident in September 1945, some 4 months after the war in Europe had ended. He was returning from a celebration at a French town he had helped liberate. We next made our way over to the gravesite of the Lebensberger brothers from Reading, Pennsylvania. At each gravesite, I was joined by the adoptee and asked to say a few words about the brothers. In the case of the Lebensberger brothers, I told them that I had the great fortune of interviewing Betty Crow, younger sister of the brothers. She told me that her brother Claire was the identical twin to Stuart, who died in the war and is buried here at Margraten. They say that twins have a sixth sense about their siblings, and Betty told me that Claire was recovering from a war wound in an army hospital in England, and that he knew the very moment when his brother was killed in the war. Claire, who died in 2013, never got the opportunity to visit the cemetery, but among his collection of old photographs, shared with me by his daughter Diane, is one from Memorial Day 1959, showing the two grave sites with a bouquet of flowers laid at each one by the kind Dutch family who had adopted their graves. Next, we went over to the gravesite of the Miklich brothers, sons of Slovenian immigrants from Cleveland, Ohio. Unfortunately, the adoptee was unable to make the journey to Margraten, but I told the assembled crowd that I had the opportunity to meet with the younger sister of the Miklich brothers, Rose Helen Miklich, who told me about growing up with her brothers in the Collinwood neighborhood of Cleveland. I also told them that I used a picture of Lou Miklich to close out my book, to accompany that wonderful quote from the author, Rick Atkinson. We then visited the Grimes brothers from Cadiz, Ohio. For a variety of reasons, there are many brothers buried at Margraten from Ohio and Pennsylvania. There, I was joined by this wonderful young woman who had adopted the grave of Wilbur Grimes. She traveled all the way from Utrecht, where my oldest son Max is spending a semester abroad, about 2 hours north. She put these incredible decorations on the burial markers. After that, we made our way to the gravesite of the Spurrier brothers from Long Beach, California, who are adopted by this wonderful couple, Joe and Marianne Leuvenberg. In many cases, the adoptees have made contact with the families back in the United States, but in some cases they have not. I was thrilled that I might be able to introduce some of the adoptees to the families I interviewed for the book. The Donlin brothers are an example where the adoptees have made contact with the family back in the United States, and they shared with me memories of Peggy Donlin Slapsinski, the daughter of Robert Donlin, coming to Margraten for the first time. It was very emotional, they said. They also told me that they have adopted 3 graves at Margraten and will one day pass them on to their 3 daughters. Peggy shared with me some incredible photographs of her father and mother, along with her uncle, and here the brothers lie together side by side, half a world away from their home in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. In some cases, the 2 brothers have been adopted by a couple, but in other cases, it is 2 different people, as was the case for the Zaki brothers from High Splint, Kentucky. John Zaki lied about his age and was just 15 years old when he joined the U.S. Army with his older brother Pete in 1940, well before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. They were sons of Italian immigrants living in a company coal town and joined the Army, they said, because they didn't want to die in a coal mine. Sadly, both were killed in the war, and here they lie today, side by side. Next, we went to visit the Durborough brothers from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Edith Durborough, the mother of the brothers, was very active in the Gold Star movement, helping the families who lost children in the war. In the early 1960s, she traveled to Margraten with a group of other Gold Star mothers, and she presented a key to the city of Harrisburg to the mayor of Margraten. We have a wonderful photo of that trip she took, standing between her two fallen sons. This family drove more than 100 kilometers to meet with me and honor the Bulger brothers from Detroit, Michigan, whose gravesites they have adopted. I told them how lucky I was to track down Eileen Hamill, a half-sister of the Bulger brothers, Martin and Robert, and how she shared photographs and stories of the brothers with me. Martin was killed in a plane crash in the north part of the Netherlands, in a small town where they've placed a memorial to him and other members of that stricken bomber crew. Along with their names carved in stone is an inscription that reads, "They fell for our freedom." Finally, we made our way over to the last visit of the day, the Goodman brothers from Cleveland, Ohio. The cemetery itself is surrounded by beautiful Dutch countryside. One of the attendees told me that a developer wanted to build a housing development nearby, but that it was blocked to preserve the serenity of the cemetery. I told the crowd how the Goodman brothers had grown up in the Glenville section of Cleveland, and that their dad was the local barber, who knew just about everyone in town and always had a great story to tell. I also told them how their oldest and sole surviving brother, Mort, never quite got over the loss of his two little brothers. Later in life, in a letter he wrote, he reflected on how much he had missed them. Quote, "I've missed both of my brothers a lot. I love them and have always missed them. Farewell, sweet brothers. We would have had some fun together." All in all, it was just an incredible day at the Netherlands American Cemetery, and I am just so amazed at the dedication the Dutch people show to these fallen American service members, some 75 years after the war ended. As we got ready to leave the cemetery, we were left with the words of Pericles from his funeral oration some 2,500 years ago, inscribed on the memorial wall. "Each for his own memorial earned praise that will never die, and with it the grandest of all sepulchres, not that in which his mortal bones are laid, but a home in the minds of men."